Hello everybody, I'm KC, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. And welcome back to Doctor Whooves Month. And today we're continuing this celebration by talking about a series as influential as Doctor Whoves' assistant, Doctor Whooves Adventures. Doctor Whooves Adventures began as a fanfiction written by Squeak the Writer Pony called Number 12, for obvious reasons, back in 2011. Squeak later formed Pony in a Box Productions, and Number 12 became the pilot episode for Doctor Whooves Adventures less than a year later. And while this may not be as popular as Doctor Whooves' Assistant, it's still one of the most well-known Doctor Whooves series out there. And it's my favorite. I'm not even going to try to lie to you. As much as I love DW&A, I absolutely adore Adventures. I love Pony in a Box Productions. Back in 2013, I submitted to be an artist for the box so many times. Though, looking back on it, I can understand why my earlier projects didn't get me in.
Good. Though I'm not feeling. No, you're not.
Ugh, I really need to redo that video. In fact, my biggest storyboard project to date was a scene from the Doctor Who spin-off series Goodnight. And as I do on this channel, it's time to share my love for this series in excessive detail. But before we go into the story, I should point out that this series doesn't have nearly as much artwork to go with it as DW&A does. Usually just a poster for the whole episode, with a different piece of art every now and then. So we're gonna have to get a little creative with the visuals here. Anyway, on with the story. In the first story, the Doctor crashes the TARDIS into Twilight's library, but he's also newly regenerated and a bit unstable, so he passes out before he can explain that he was followed. Soon, Twilight, Spike, and Pinky find themselves being threatened by the Weeping Angels. By the way, this was my first introduction to the Weeping Angels. It certainly left an impression. But once the Doctor is back on his feet, he explains who he is and what's going on. Shenanigans ensue, the danger increases, and Twilight and the gang try to help the Doctor stop whatever the Weeping Pegasi have in store for Equestria. This is an amazing introduction. While I'm going to try to refrain from comparing the series to Doctor Whoves' Assistant, since I want to judge the show on its own merits, I will make an exception here, just to show what Doctor Whoves Adventures has to offer to make it stand out. I mentioned in my last video that DW&A has more in common in tone with MLP, but Adventures, right from the start, has much more in common with Doctor Who, especially in its tone and pacing, including establishing much more about Doctor Who's mythology in its introduction. The fish out of water perspective is back on the companion, who in this series is Twilight, as she tries to take in everything that's happened since this strange pony crashed into her house, and all the trouble that he brought with him, while the Doctor just kind of assumes his natural role, since he has about as much culture shock as Captain America and the Avengers. But before we go more into the story, let's get to know our characters a bit more. The Doctor is played by the Jam Jar. Now, Jam, I honestly couldn't find in many other projects. I know he directs the vinyl scratch tapes, but outside of a cameo or two, including his reoccurring role in Assistant, this seems to be his most well-known role. So, how is the Doctor portrayed here? Well, like I said, he seems to take the whole crashing into a land of magical horses thing in stride. Mostly just sees it as another adventure. Though the puns in equestrian culture tend to get on his nerves.
Anyway, if the angels are here, that means bad things for whatever this place is called.
Equestria.
Of course it is.
He approaches most problems with an educated curiosity, with pure fascination of how things like magic and the strange creatures they come across function, trying to adjust to a world that runs primarily on magic. While he takes to it rather quickly, applying the situation to Clark's third law, he's not afraid to ask questions, which is something he has to do quite a bit since there is still a lot about this world he doesn't know. Once the adventures begin and the unfamiliar danger comes into play, this character trait comes in handy. He breaks down a problem with all of the knowledge he can gather and tries to find the most civil way to solve it. This is best illustrated in episode 4, where the Doctor discovers the villain's motivations, and once he realizes why he's causing so much trouble, he tries his best to get him to see the error of his ways. While he'll protect others at any cost, he's somewhat sympathetic towards every pony, including the villains, hearing them out before trying to stop them. Another well-known character trait of the Doctor for decades. I also kind of love just how domestic the Doctor is in this series. Like, he just wanders around town with Twilight and just waits in the TARDIS in the basement for Twilight to be ready for another adventure. I know there's enough in the TARDIS to keep him busy for years, but it's really not like him.
Is this how time normally passes? Really slowly. In the right order.
I'd say it's another sign of just how dependent he is of Twilight due to just how unfamiliar he is with this universe, but that's pure speculation on my part. Still, it is kinda cute. And while the anger and fury the Doctor is capable of hasn't been shown in this version yet, there have been moments of sorrow, of helplessness. They've been few and far between so far, but I feel like those times where the Doctor just doesn't know what to do or can't do anything are where this incarnation is going to be pushed to the limit. But in those few moments where we have seen the Doctor pushed, it's written and performed wonderfully. Jam Jar is a brilliant Doctor. While I stand by the philosophy that there has never been a bad actor to play the Doctor, the ones who do it the best, especially the last few incarnations, are the ones that can convince you that they have lived through the Doctor's long history, that no matter how they appear, they can make you believe that they are 1,000 years old. And while there are many wonderful Doctor Who's voice actors out there, none I have heard pull this off better than Jam. Episodes like Last Light, Rhapsody in Blue Box, and parts of Wrong Way Backwards push the Doctor farther than anything else in the series thus far. And he is able to play both sides of this coin and deliver such energetic and powerful performances. Of the excited yet weary traveler, seeking adventure yet hoping it never goes too far. Once again, two conflicting character traits, but very well balanced. But enough about the Doctor, let's talk about his companion, who in this series is a very familiar face. Twilight Sparkle is played by Lauren Goodnight, who has appeared in various projects including the Vinyl Scratch Tapes, Epic Pony Rap Battle, and even runs a few podcasts. Looking back on it, casting Twilight, the main character in MLP, in the role of the Doctor's companion, was a risky move. Ponies like Derpy and Lyra are one thing, they're mostly fan creations and can be interpreted in different ways because of that. But Twilight has an established character, so people are going to be more critical about how she's portrayed. But with that said, I think she's an excellent choice to be his companion. I mentioned before that the Doctor faces things with an educated curiosity. Well, so does she. Twilight's most played-up character trait in this series is her thirst for knowledge and how she applies it during these adventures. Sure, she gets angry with the Doctor when he first arrives, but that's because he doesn't stop to answer her questions. She wants to know what's going on, and she doesn't let up until she finds out. But during the Weeping Pegasi incident, the Doctor earns her trust. And when she finds out that he can travel through time, she wants to go on this adventure just as much as he does. So she agrees to come along with him. And her advanced knowledge of magic and Equestria in general is especially helpful for the Doctor when they get in a jam. Because of the situation the Doctor is in, they seem to be on equal ground, much more than most companions, each helping the other understand something very unusual, and working together to solve the problems put in front of them. It's that sense of equality and mutual understanding that makes them such a great team. The only times Twilight gets frustrated or angry with the Doctor is when he won't let her help, or won't tell her something about what's going on. While the Doctor does tell Twilight almost everything she needs to know about him in the first episode, there are things he hasn't told her, and what will happen when those things come to light has yet to be seen. And while I was bothered at first by the fact that Lauren Goodnight doesn't sound that much like Twilight, her performance is wonderful. Even if she doesn't sound exactly like the character, she portrays the character excellently, getting across Twilight's personality perfectly. So even if I don't think she sounds exactly like Twilight, I can still see her as Twilight. And that's all that matters. Now, characters like Pinky and Spike do have recurring roles, but I'm more interested in moving on to talk about the stories. I know I didn't talk about the stories individually in my Doctor Who's an Assistant video, but that's because there were a lot more of them. So far, Adventures has had 5 separate stories made up of 7 episodes, not including Wrong Way Backwards, so it's easier to go over them quickly. As I said before, number 12, the pilot episode, is a great introduction, setting up that this series will feel much more like Doctor Who, since they explain much more about the Doctor and his background, and pretty much assumes you know everything you need to know about Equestria and the MLP characters. Combined with clever strategies, high stakes, and wonderful performances, especially for the first episode, it makes for a great start. And the preceding episodes continue this wonderful adventure with interesting world building, very enjoyable interactions, memorable one-off characters in every episode, and great villains that create engaging conflicts. Episodes 3 and 4 are a great first outing, and the first completely original episodes in the series. Shadows of the Lunar Republic, while it was based on a very well-made comic by team artist Cybertoaster, like number 12, the adaptation breathes new life into it. putting an interesting and somewhat darker spin on the Vashta Nerada, if that's even possible, and it's the best way the ensemble cast has been used so far, even if it kinda pushes the Doctor to the side in the climax. And as much as I enjoy the wonderful setup and unique lore of Bells of Fate, I don't think I could comment on it much more, since the story isn't done yet, and that would be premature. I will give Bells of Fate credit for one thing right now. The music is amazing. Yeah, there have been songs and adventures before, but nothing like this. These brand new songs really give off a Les Mis vibe and sound like they could have been from a professional Broadway musical. From the orchestrations to the performances, it really surprised me when I first heard them. Especially the duet with the King and Queen, which...
I feel my soul in eternal sleep, beyond the point where strong ones weep.
There is something familiar about the King's voice.
I call this meeting of the Black Kingdom to order.
I can't put my finger on it. I've heard this guy's voice somewhere before.
I've had enough humour in them. Argue amongst yourselves.
Oh, this is driving me crazy. Hang on, I gotta look this up. No way. It's Kovabom! Kovabom is in Doctor Whooves Adventures! You might know him if you're a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, since some of his most well-known works are in various Sonic comic dramas. He even produced some of his own a while back. His work is awesome, and I have been a fan of his for years. You guys know what a big Sonic fan I am, so I'm sure this is no surprise. What? I haven't done a Sonic video yet? Why not? Seriously though, who knew he could sing? Back to the stories. Since this is a Doctor Who inspired series, there is a continuing story, mostly foreshadowing to a huge event that will likely be the season finale. There have been hints dropped all over the place, mainly in the shorts, but the most recent episode at the time of recording this, Rhapsody in Blue Box, was the biggest bit of foreshadowing to the future story, Traveler. Traveler was another fanfiction written by Squeak, and after some bits of foreshadowing, it was confirmed that Traveler would be adapted into a Doctor Who's adventure. What's it all about? How will such an epic tale affect the show? I don't know, because the fanfiction it's based on is currently incomplete, and is likely going to stay incomplete, so the time it would take to finish the story can be dedicated to the audio version. The reason I bring this up at all is because of how dedicated Pony in a Box has been so far to building this thing up. Rhapsody in Blue Box in particular came right out of nowhere. The episode follows a brand new character, a reporter named Penny Dreadful, and it came out after part 1 of Bells of Fate, before part 2. The videos that involve foreshadowing to the events of Traveler are never advertised that way. You just realize it as you go on with a hint here and there, and this realization was a punch to the gut. The Doctor doesn't even show up until 15 minutes in, but when he does, it's the heartbreaking highlight of the episode. And this was the first big piece of evidence of just how bad things are going to get, how high the stakes will be. That when the events that lead to this happen, it's going to be a greater challenge than any other the Doctor has faced in his time in Equestria. And we already start to feel the consequences before we even fully understand the actions. Because Penny was apparently the Doctor's companion after things got bad. And because of that, she was in danger of being erased from existence. A reporter traveling with the Doctor. My, doesn't that sound familiar? While it will be a while before we see how these events come to be, the build-up has been amazing. But at this point, I expect nothing less from this series. Overall, there's a reason this is my favorite Doctor Who series out of all of them. The stories are epic and entertaining, the writing is remarkable, the performances are astounding, the characters, long-term or one-off, are all memorable with wonderful personality, and the production value is consistent and impressive. This series will feel much more familiar to a Doctor Who audience than a My Little Pony one, but it blends these two very different worlds together almost seamlessly. And while it does take a lot longer to produce episodes of the show than it used to, I personally don't mind the wait. As long as they keep bringing this level of quality entertainment, I can wait a while longer for what I'm sure will be more amazing adventures, and I do hope the show continues for at least one more season after Traveler, because I've enjoyed every journey with the Doctor and Twilight so far, and I hope there are many more to come. So now that the review is done, it's time to reveal my... This was a lot easier than with DW and A, since this has been my favorite episode for a long time. Chords of Chaos and Pony of the Opera were the first episodes of a proper Doctor Who's time travel story that I had heard, and I loved it. The history they created, Twilight and the Doctor out on their first proper adventure together, showing off more of their wonderful chemistry, and a conflict that creates one of the best fan-made villains I have seen. I won't say too much more for fear of spoiling it, but Dorian is a wonderful antagonist that has brought up some of the most emotional moments in the series so far. To me, it has a little bit of everything that makes me love this show. Maybe not the best episode, but definitely the one I've listened to the most, and even after so many amazing stories, it's still my favorite. If I had the time and resources, I could probably storyboard this entire story. If you haven't heard this series yet, I cannot recommend it enough. And while you're at it, check out some of their other shows, like the Goodnight shorts, a spin-off to Adventures, and the Sherlock Whooves series, which I also love immensely, to the surprise of absolutely no one. But now, it's time to see how two very different yet awfully familiar worlds will come together to save the entire multiverse. Next time, we're going the wrong way backwards. Until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.